minutes after, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to everybody who is joining us and joining us as we talk. We have a giant group today signed up, which is exciting. In case you're confused about what webinar you're in, this is the 10 mistakes people make when moving to topic-based offering, which is exciting. I'm Sharon. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold and I spontaneously coughed. And I apologize for that. I'm Sharon Burton. I look like that. That picture was taken by my son, the only person I think who can get any kind of good picture out of me. He's a fantastic photographer. I solve post-sales customer experience problems. What does that mean? That means that I do research into how people feel about product instructions. I support my clients in creating better product instructions, which then improves the customer experience. And then I teach communication at various universities. That's generally what I do. I kind of do all things content, which is fun and exciting, and I really enjoy it. All right, so in a supporting role today, we have DCL. If you have a question as I go, as a couple of you already have, they're going to help you in the questions window. I will be taking questions at the end. The questions may make us go over time, but the plan is to finish the webinar within the allotted time. If you have the ability to spend time with us afterwards, we'll absolutely get to your questions. If you have to go, I'll be showing you my email again. You can just send me a question. So at the end, you'll be getting my webinar. And let's say a giant thank you to Data Conversion Labs for hosting this webinar. They are the bomb. They've got this great webinar thing going on where they're just doing these educational webinars for people, and I just think that's the best. And because of that, we're going to do a little ad for DCL because they're doing this for free, which is fabulous. So DCL blends years of conversion, you guys can read that. The thing for you to know is that DCL is fantastic. They've got a huge infrastructure. They've got US-based management. They have got the experience in converting legacy content into usable content. And if you've got buckets of legacy content, and most of us do, they can really help you get all of that stuff moved and changed and just all of that. Harmonizer, for me, is one of their best features. At least it's the one that I like a lot. What is Harmonizer? Harmonizer will actually go through and evaluate your content and help you figure out how close your content is to being aligned. And that's something I'm going to be talking about later. But they did this for me for a client I had last year. It was fantastic. They just ran a fast check for us so that we could figure out how close was the content. What do I mean by that? Well, how many different ways are there to say on the file menu click print, right? There's like 4,000 ways. And that's one of the things that you need to actually start finding out so you can start normalizing and rationalizing the content. That's what Harmonizer does. That alone is sufficient. Excuse me for the coughing. They've got a huge client base, so clearly they know what they're doing, which is fantastic. And pretty much, I don't care what your industry is, they've worked in it, so they've got that background as well. And they're just super nice people. When you see them at a trade show, stop by their booth and just chat. They're just super great people. And they do this webinar series, which I just think is the best. So DCL, they rock. Okay. What is topic-based authoring? I want to give you a fast definition so that we all know what it is that we're talking about. This is from Wikipedia. It's very small print. I don't expect you to read the whole thing. Basically, though, topic-based authoring is a modular content creation approach. It often, but not always, involves XML. It lets you do things like content management, and important to us as a business goal, lets you create and then recombine content. Now, what is a topic? We're topic-based authoring, right? A topic is a discrete piece of content. Often, not always, but often is about a specific subject. So it's got, we've got content types and things like task, concept, reference. And so they're very small pieces of information. And some of the business benefits of moving to topic-based authoring includes focusing your content development effort on the information your user needs to use the product. which I know sounds like what you're doing now, but it's actually kind of different. In my experience, when you were doing document-based content development, content got shoved in because somebody said, well, I think somebody will need to know this. And you had no real way to push back. So you wind up, certainly in your legacy content, with a lot of content that isn't really related to how your customers need to use and interact with the product. When you move to topic-based authoring, because you're focused on topics, on things, on discrete topics like concept, task, reference, all of a sudden, it turns out, the content gets much more focused and is much more user-centric. It also lets you maximize content reuse. If you've done a lot of online help development, topic-based authoring is a much more natural place for you. You understand it much better because when you're developing online help systems, you tend to be creating smaller pieces of content to start with. I'm not saying that you always do, I'm saying you tend to. If you're moving to DITA, if you're looking at moving to DITA, whether you're looking at moving to DITA now or down the line, topic-based authoring is part of that trip. So if you're going to move to DITA at some point, you have to start creating content in smaller pieces. But topic-based authoring is also a place to stop. There are good business reasons to move just to topic-based authoring and not go all the way to DITA. It just depends on your environment. However, if you're moving to DITA, you have to go through the topic-based authoring part of this. You do. There's no two ways around it. So what is a topic? Well, a topic is small. Perhaps a half a printed page. I've seen situations where content goes up to maybe 4 printed pages. Now, why am I using printed pages as the unit of measurement? Because I need to be able to talk about content in a unit of measurement that we all understand. We all understand printed pages. But topic-based authoring, obviously, doesn't mean that you have to do printed pages. You could move completely online, or you could move to cell phone devices, or. But we all kind of understand how much content is in a printed page. So, but your topics may be even smaller than that. Depending on how far down and how granular you get, your topics could be 2 steps. It could be that there are 2 steps that are required for nearly everything that your customer does in their product. I did that once with cash register manuals. To do any kind of programming in the cash register, the first 3 steps were the same. Those 3 steps were their own topic, and you embed that topic in other topics. So you're only including the information needed to perform one procedure or understand one concept or get one reference idea. These are very small pieces of information. And then the beauty of this is you can combine and recombine these topics in different ways depending on what you need to do. And then one of the things that I found the first time I moved to group topic-based authoring, and I was surprised about this, topics are easier to update. It is easier and cheaper to get approval for updating topics than it is for chapters if you're in a document-based environment right now. For reasons I've never understood, when you go to your management, you say, okay, we need to update one section of Chapter 4. What management hears is, oh my God, we've got to update Chapter 4. And you go, no, 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 just one piece. And they go, we don't have time to do the review process for Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is, what, 75 pages? We don't have time to do that. You go, no, 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 just one piece of Chapter 4. And they go, I know, Chapter 4 is really big, isn't it? And you go, no, 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 no. I don't understand why that happens, but it does. It's much easier to go to management and say, okay, we have these 10 topics that need to be reviewed. Management goes, oh, topics are small. That'll be easy. So getting permission to update those topics is much easier, and then pushing those topics out to your publication, whether it's smart devices, website, whatever it is much easier because people don't hear, oh my God, we've got to publish the entire help system again. What they hear when you say we're going to push out these 4 topics is, we're going to push out these 4 topics. So all of a sudden, the docs effort seems much easier and much simpler. So this is my bad graphic example. I am not gifted when it comes to graphics. But this gives you a visual idea of what topics look like. They're just pieces of information. about your product. They have some relationships to each other, but that's not necessarily inherent. They're just pieces of content. And then you can take those pieces of content and you can start creating an admin guide or a programmer's guide or a getting started guide. And if you look at the topics, you'll notice we're reusing them across. Now, these are just the deliverables. This doesn't include output to like online help or smartphone devices or iPads or HTML5 or whatever. We could add a whole nother level of complexity by doing that. So our content is separate from the formatting and separate from the deliverable. We're just creating pieces of information. It's so easy and straightforward. All right, so what are the mistakes that I see when my clients do this? And these, by the way, are in no order of importance. It's not like number 1 is the most common and number 10 is the least common. These are just the most common ways to screw this up. Because you don't want to screw this up, right? All right, number 1, not getting buy-in. Management and other teams have to understand why this is better and how it's going to impact things. You can't just start doing this. You can't go to management and say, we want to move to topic-based offering because all the cool kids are doing it. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to show an instant and dramatic improvement. So don't go to your management and say, if we move to topic-based offering, we are going to instantly see that our content development effort is much better. You're not going to see that unless you're localizing. You may see an immediate and dramatic cost reduction in localization when you move to topic-based offering. But you've got to make clear to your management and your team members and your project members and all of those other people, making this transition, you may be impacting schedules. And you may be developing less content, and that can be scary. I have worked with clients who haven't understood that less content that is more suited to the purpose is actually a better way to go. There are customers, there are people out there who think if we have lots and lots of content, then that's good, right? When in fact, lots and lots of content may be negatively impacting the customer experience. Hang on, Steve. We'll get there. So you need to get buy-in from management, and the further up the food chain you can go, the better off you are. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were considering something interesting. 10 years ago, my clients were all tech pubs groups. The tech writers came to me and said, help. In the last year or two, it's been at least the lowest level that's come to me has been directors. So content is really rising as an issue in our companies, and it's getting to the director and the VP level. They're the ones who see the problems, and they're the ones who want this problem solved. And what's interesting is at that level, those issues are very different than down at the tech pub level. So you've got to get buy-in, and I walk the food chain up as far as you can get because they care and it matters. All right, another way to mess this up, using the same tools. I just, every time I see somebody posting to Tech World or LinkedIn or some group saying, what's the best tool for topic-based offering? My head explodes because that is such, at best, a naive question. The problems that your company is trying to solve with your content and what your pain points are probably very different than other people, which means there is no best tool out there. But the thing I can tell you is the tool that you're using that got you into the mess you're in is probably not the tool that's going to get you out of this. And you've got to sit down and do a discovery phase and do an analysis. What are your content problems? What are your business problems that your content isn't solving? And then how are you going to solve those now and in the future? Asking people what they're using and running out and buying that is not the right solution. It's the right solution probably for the people who are using whatever tool it is they're using, but you've probably got different problems. And you're going to be shocked to discover that, well, we ran right out and bought tool X, and it seems to not be solving our problems. I don't understand what happened. So work with the vendors. Maybe bring in a consultant, because we consultants tend to work with multiple tools. We tend to have seen many, many problems, and we tend to know what the best practices are across companies. We also tend to know the questions to ask. Not an advertisement for consultants, I'm just saying. And then work with the vendors. Yes, vendors want to sell you product, absolutely. But the vendors also know what their products solve and how their products solve it, which means you can ask questions and decide, is this way of solving this problem going to work best for us? So yeah, same tool, no, not good. Another issue is using the same processes. Oh, Wes, we've got a new tool, but we want to use the same processes. I'm here to tell you, if you're looking at changing to topic-based offering, you need to get new tools, and definitionally your processes are going to change. Developing topic-based content is different. If you've been doing document-based authoring and you're going to move to topic-based authoring, the processes that you used to publish a 200-page manual or a 200-topic on help system or whatever it is that you've been doing, those processes aren't going to work anymore. And it's not just in your group. It's everything. It's everything. I'm working with a client right now. They're fantastic people. I love them. I really love them. And they got it from day one, that if they're going to change tools, they've got to reevaluate how they do everything, because it's all got to change. So topics, because they are small pieces, they stand alone in content and in formatting. Formatting is separate, which means we're going to take this topic, we're going to make it look different depending on the output, which means all those people that have been fussing about how things look, they don't get to fuss about that anymore. Or at least they get to fuss about it, but we don't have to necessarily pay any attention to them, because we're going to automate formatting depending on what we're pushing out to. Topics also can be reviewed as they're ready, which means the review process has got to change. Instead of pushing out Chapter 4 for review, you're going to be pushing out much smaller pieces of information, which means you've got to help your reviewers understand why you're doing this different and get buy-in for that. So all of your processes are probably going to change. Maybe not all of them. Maybe some of them won't. But you've got to do that evaluation to start understanding, how is it that we do this now, and how is this going to change, and how are we going to manage that change? That change management process has got to be thought through. You can't just dump new processes on people. Well, you can, but you're not going to like how that goes. So the same processes that you used before, not going to work so well. Which brings us to not training people. This is one of those that I just had this conversation with a friend of mine this morning. Not training people sets up your project and the people involved in the project for failure. People are not going to magically know. They're just not. So you're getting new tools, you're creating new processes. That means you've got to train them. And I don't mean just training your content developers. Remember the review? Maybe you even need to train people who are involved in the build. Pushing content out in the build process probably has to change. Getting those people involved in the build process and getting them trained in how that's going to work, you've got to do it. And training is much more than just how to use the product. It's what are the best practices for our workflow? What are the changes that need to be done? This is, again, part of that change management process. And then how are we doing what we're doing, and why are we doing it this way in the new workflow? You've got to train people. And the companies that do this best do not just throw people in training and then say, good, then you're done. The companies that do this best involve the staff in creating that training and getting people to get buy-in. They feel like they've been part of creating how we're going to do this, and then they own how we're doing this. And the training is much more successful. much more successful because everybody understands why we are now changing to this better way to do it. Number 5, love this one, not planning the move. You cannot, as one of my professors used to tell me in graduate school, you cannot jump on your horse and ride off in all directions. You can't do it. You cannot. You've got to analyze what you have before you decide what you have. This is a step that you can really, this can really derail a project. I've got some bad news for you. Your legacy content is not going to fit neatly into the new topic types that you've decided you've got. At the very least, your legacy content is probably not well written or well structured or well organized, especially if you've had contractors or if your legacy content has been around a while. And this is not because you're bad, but we've all been on those projects where you're just slamming in content, or your contractors are slamming in content. Everybody knows they're not doing it. The people who are doing it, are not doing it in the most supportable way as you move forward. Everybody knows that we need to go in and backfill this and make it more structured, make it better, etc. But right now, we just need to finish this project. And then nobody ever has time to go back in and backfill it. It's not because you're bad. Everybody's in that situation because sometimes deadlines are just unreasonable. And it's just what you have to do to hit the deadline. Bad news is that content probably has to get converted. And you may not have given that content any thought for 3 years, but it's out there waiting for you. This can also be very hard on your staff, making this move, because in my experience, everybody thinks their content is special. You know, yes, they'll say, yes, we need to move to a more structured offering. Yes, we need content types. Yes, we need to do this. Except the content I work on is special, and it's not going to do that. We can't do that with my content. My content, as a matter of fact, is so special. I have to brush its hair every day, and once a week I have to feed it ice cream. And at night, before I go home, I have a special pillow that I put its little head on, and that's my content. I understand your content will do this. My content is special. Well, I've got some bad news for you. Your content is not special. Now, your workflow may be unique and interesting, and it may have unique and interesting business drivers. Absolutely, absolutely. But your content is content. It's not special. I know it breaks your heart, right? Because you brush its hair and everything, right? But it's not special. It's just content. What needs to happen with that content may be special and unique, but your content isn't. So you've got to plan the move, and you've got to actually do the analysis of your content to discover what you've got and what's the effort in moving it to the new system. And by the way, some of that content may never get moved. It could be, when you do that analysis, that content is old, it's out of date, it's been superseded, it's wrong. You'd be shocked how much of your content is just flat wrong. We've already got better content that covers that same topic over here in this other area. So just because you've got the content doesn't mean you need to move it, but you don't know that until you've done the analysis. Sorry about that. I don't know I'm going to cough, so I'm sorry I do that in your ear. I don't have time to hit a mute button or move something. And this is related to writing guidelines. Once you have moved your content into a topic-based authoring system, whether it's just topic-based authoring or you've gone all the way into Ditto, the reality is one of the big business benefits you're going to get is you can combine and recombine that content. What that means is the content that I have written and the content that Sue has written and the content that Patty has written could potentially all be pulled together into one deliverable to our customer. They don't know, nor should they know, that 3 separate people wrote that content. What that means is we've got to have consistent writing standards, because it should not be obvious to the customer that multiple people were involved in creating that content. Now, that starts with everybody writes the same. That means that we don't have 15 ways to say on the file menu, click print, right? It's not on the file menu, click print, from the file menu, click print on the file menu. Everybody's got to say it the same. And once you have implemented a topic-based authoring solution, you may discover that there are other groups that are going to join you. For example, marketing, the people who are working on the knowledge base, etc. At that point, it probably will financially make sense to bring in a product like Acrolinks, which will actually start enforcing everybody writing in one voice, using the same structures, etc. And if you're localizing, that's where you're going to see that massive drop in localization costs. Because now everybody is saying everything the same way, which means every time you write on the file menu, click print, that's already been translated to 22 different languages. It doesn't need to be translated again. You can reuse the content that's already been translated. Huge reduction, right? Huge reduction in localization costs. But what this means is that you cannot have everybody writing in their style. Well, I think that this is a better way to write. Well, that's nice. And when you go home at night, you should write that way all night. Just blog away in your style. But here, when we're working for the insert name of your employer here, we write and phrase this way. Because at the end of the day, when that content gets combined and recombined, it's got to all sound like it came from the same company. It's got to. And that means writing standards. All right, this is one I love. I love this one. I have hopefully a funny story to tell you on this one. Slicing content according to headings. It is very easy because most tools allow you to import your legacy content and slice it based on, for example, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, etc. It's very easy to think, well, once we've done that, we're done, right? We've got topics. Because we have imported our content from, for example, FrameMaker into Flare, and we told FrameMaker, every time you see a heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and heading 4, create a new topic. And it did it. It was like magic. Flare just did it. So we're now topic-based, right? We're good to go? Well, yes, but no. Because that's like step 1. And it's step 1 of multiple steps. And the multiple steps is bigger than 2 steps. That's what I mean by that step 1 of X, and X is bigger than 2. It is absolutely a giant help that the tools let you do that. Giant help. But you're in no way, shape, or form done. It just means you've now got content in topics. Now the real hard work starts, because now you've got to start thinking about content types. You've got to start thinking about content reuse, et cetera, et cetera. So to Steve's question, I don't have a problem importing from FrameMaker into Flare, doing the whole book all at once, and letting Flare do it. But in no way, shape, or form are you done yet. That's just a great way to wholesale get the content in. I personally prefer, in the scenario that Steve's got up about moving from FrameMaker into Flare, I prefer to do the cleanup and the rationalization of the content in FrameMaker. That's my preference, because it's easier to deal with 12 chapters than it is with 75 topics when I'm normalizing the content. I think it's easier in FrameMaker, simply because I know it's going to get sliced when I pull it into Flare. So I'm dealing with bigger chunks of information in FrameMaker, and it's easier to do the search and replace, I think, in FrameMaker. That does not mean it's a best practice. I'm just saying, I think it's easier. If you prefer to do the cleanup in Flare, that's great. That's where your preference is. I'm an expert in both products. I'm just saying that's my preference. It's not a best practice. Steve, did that make sense? As I cough, Steve's still here. Hopefully he's not napping. And it's okay if he does. My voice is like a lullaby. So I one time was working with a docs manager. Last time I was docs manager. The 5-year plan was to move the entire group into Ditto. We were a mess. And by mess, I mean a mess. There was no organization. We were a mess. So step one was to kind of get everybody writing the same way. I had a writer who didn't understand why we were planning and managing the move, because he went to a conference and he attended a talk on DITA. You guys are going to laugh. And it looked really easy to him. And in essence, he didn't understand why we didn't run down to the DITA store, get a couple of big buckets of DITA. We had a lot of content, so we need a couple of big buckets of DITA, and then just pour it all over onto our content. What was the problem? And I don't even know what to say to that. The story kind of just ends there with me shaking my head. That's just kind of the end of the story right there. His idea was we would just slice the content and we would be done, right? So no, you're not just running out, and once you've imported, you're not done. You're just not done. It's a good start, but you're in no way, shape, or form done. All right, number 8 is not reusing content, which again relates, yeah, this is all starting to relate. Writing content is an expensive proposition. It's not cheap to write content. And by writing content, I don't mean just, with your fingers creating words, right? Because that's not it. Writing content is way more than just putting some words down. Writing content involves research. It involves a whole bunch of other stuff. It also involves other groups. You've got reviews. You've got publishing it, which may involve other groups, probably does. Writing content is expensive. Recreating content that already exists but nobody knows about it is enormously expensive because you've already paid for that content once, which means you're paying for this content twice. That's craziness. And then localizing content that's similar but different is drop-dead expensive. Because, and the localization companies will take your money. They're more than happy to translate on the file menu, click print, from the file menu, click print on the file menu. They're more than happy to do that because if you're going to be dumb enough to write it in 15 different ways, they're happy enough to translate it that, right? So you've got to reuse content. And this is where, in my experience, a lot of the lower-end products aren't quite doing it. There's opportunistic reuse, which means you remember that content like this was written before. And then you decide you've got to go find it. Some of the lower-end products don't really support you in this effort, nor should you expect them to. They were not created to support you in this effort. So, for example, the cash register manuals I mentioned earlier, I wrote all of them. There were a lot of them. And I knew what content had been written before. So I knew what to go, oh, yes, that's right, we're programming, whatever, right? That worked fine. I was one person. When you've got a group of 15 people, they have no idea what other writers wrote. They have no idea. Nor could they. It is not possible for people to remember in their heads content that was written before when 14 other people are writing content. Even if the group is small enough so that you kind of all generally know what it is you're writing, it's a gigantic time sink for people to go and find content. Opportunistic reuse is just not a good strategy. Systemic research or systematic research, or systematic reuse is when the system knows this content has been written before, and it prompts the writer for reuse. Humans are not good at remembering things. We're not. We like to think we are. We're not, right? Nobody gets 30 and is still thinking, oh, I'm very good at remembering things. Or at least nobody in my experience is very good at that. Computers are very good at remembering things. Let's have the computer do that which we are not good at so that we can focus on what we are good at, we humans are good at. So if you're going to move to a topic-based authoring system, don't forget some sort of automated, systemic reuse capability so that you, being you, the group, individual, and you, the group, don't waste time trying to find content that was previously written, or nobody is trying to reuse content. Everybody is writing it brand new, because you're not going to see the efficiencies you should be seeing by moving to a topic-based authoring system. You've got to do it. Now, Flare kind of has it, kind of. I think it could be done better. I say Flare because I know Steve is looking to move into it. FrameMaker, unstructured FrameMaker natively doesn't have it. Just doesn't have it, which makes those kinds of projects really interesting. So yeah, you want some sort of content management-ness built into the system that you're going to. And that's the compelling business reason, by the way, to go to a content management system is this content reuse. You can make that business case easy peasy. All right, number 9, not considering your audience. Here's something to think about. Your users are not stupid. They know their job. Now, by the way, I've worked almost exclusively in the business-to-business world, so that's the frame of reference I come from. But even if you're doing business to consumer, your customers aren't dumb. They know what they want to do. They know their domain of knowledge very well. For example, if you're doing industrial automation products, the people who are using your products are genius at their installation, at their industrial automation environment. That's their domain of knowledge. They're genius at that. They don't know your product necessarily particularly well, but they're genius in their domain. We don't need to educate them in their domain, right? If we're developing documentation for cell phones, we don't need to explain the theory of cell phones because nobody cares, right? Nobody cares. It's magic. That's how the phone talks to other phones. It's magic. You just need to help them invoke the spells, i.e., dial the phone, set up an email, etc. Here's news. Most users are intermediate users. What does that mean? That means that people start off as a beginning user, but because they are experts in their domain, in their tasks, they move very quickly from being a beginning user into an intermediate. What that means is 69% of your users are an intermediate user. What does that mean? That means that because of the nature of time and space, you cannot write all possible content. You cannot develop all possible content that all of your users might need, which means you have to make some decisions about the content you are going to develop, which means when you make that choice, go for your intermediate users. Your experts will figure it out because that's what expert people do. Your beginning users will move very quickly into intermediate users. You will get almost 70% of your users you will be able to help if you focus on your intermediate users. When I see people moving to topic-based authoring, they very often waste a lot of time moving legacy content that was meant for beginning users. That teaches them, I'll never forget, last time I was documentation manager, we had 20 pages, and I'm not making this up, 20 pages how to use Windows in 2005. 2005, we had 20 pages of how to use a mouse, how to use menus, how. And we localized that into 4 different languages. And every time a new version of Windows came out, we added how to use that version of Windows. This was an industrial automation software product. If they didn't know how to use Windows, we had nothing of value to say to them. We cut that right away. And we stopped localizing it, and we stopped maintaining it, and. If when you do the content analysis, the discovery phase of what you've got, seriously consider dumping all of the beginning stuff, except for maybe a getting started. Seriously consider that. You're not going to be localizing it. You don't have to maintain it. And I'm here to tell you, most of your users aren't using it. It's a very small percentage. I'm not saying it's always best practice, but it's like almost always the best practice. It's a real outlier situation where I would look at content and go, you know what? Your business workflow, your customers' content needs, yeah, we need to include some of this. We absolutely do. Okay, I've got a question up. Do you have good... Erica, let me see if I can come back to that at the end. Let me get all the way through this because I want to make sure I get all the way through this. All right. This is my favorite, related to going down to the DITA store and getting a couple of buckets of DITA and bringing it back. Your legacy content is not going to fit neatly into content categories. And mistakes I see customers make is, well, this won't take any time to figure out. We don't need to waste any time, they'll tell me. We don't need to waste any time doing any kind of discovery. We know what our content is, and we know what our business problems are. And I go, oh, well, that's really good. That's fantastic. And then I start asking those questions anyway, because I've never had a customer who, in fact, had their arms around this. And often they're shocked to discover what they didn't know. So I start asking those questions very nicely, because I do. Customers who say, well, we can just do this as we go. We'll just convert content as we go. It won't be a problem. You know, it won't impact schedules or anything. It'll all be fine. It'll all be fine. How hard can it be? After all, when we import it into Flare, we can tell it to just slice it up based on topics. We're done, right? No problem. Sure. No. My favorite is let's hire an intern. Let's hire an intern, and they can just figure out this DITA stuff. It won't be an issue. No. No, don't do that. I mean, I'm not saying don't hire an intern. Interns can be fantastic, right? They shiny-faced interns who are super excited. Absolutely, they can be of value. They can do some of the monkey work that needs to be done while you're focused on some of the more important stuff. Interns can absolutely be of value, but don't hire an intern and expect them to come up with how you guys are going to do this. It's just not a very good process. We can meet all of our deadlines while we completely restructure all of our content. No, you can't. No, really you can't. I was just recording a podcast with a friend of mine the other day that'll be out later this week. And he has just finished an 18-month restructure. And that's all he's done. When I say that's all he's done, I don't mean, oh, he did, no, that's literally all he did for 18 months. He did the content analysis. He did the content restructure. He did the normalization, the rationalization. That's all he's done for 18 months. And he says if he had realized where they would be 18 months later, it probably would have taken 2 years, because there was content he didn't know existed. There were just, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, not so good. And then my personal favorite is, you know what, we bought product X. We just need some templates. That's all we need. Yeah, not so much. My guess is if you think you just need some templates, you don't even know what your information is yet. And yes, you do need templates. I'm not saying you don't. But we need to back up and do some content analysis to figure out what kind of content you've got, so we understand what kind of templates you need, and we need to understand what you're pushing it out to, and not just publishing out to now, what you're publishing out to 3 years from now. What is it at the customer experience level is going on? Do you have a voice of the customer program? Are the customers saying, we don't want paper documents anymore? I worked with a client last year who said that. Their customer said, we don't want paper documents anymore. We want everything on mobile devices. We want them on tablets because we don't want paper documents anymore. So while we could do some content analysis and make recommendations now, we needed to look at what is it we need to do so that when we start publishing out to tablets, we're set. It's not going to be an, oh my God, my hair's on fire thing, right? All right. Excellent question up by Mike. He wants to know, can an information architect help the process of moving towards topic-based or DITA? Not only is the answer yes, the answer is a resounding yes, Mike. Not only can they help, I wouldn't start doing this without somebody with some information architecture in the background. That's one of the compelling reasons to pull in a consultant, is to get that. Are companies successful without a consultant? Sometimes. It depends on what you've got. I have worked with clients who had all of the people they needed to make this, to do this, but they couldn't get management to understand the endeavor unless they brought in a consultant. You guys know your politics. I have been brought in, I'm not saying this happens often, but I have been brought in as the outsider we've paid a lot of money to, and because we paid a lot of money to the outsider, the project is a higher priority, and we get the resources we need, even though we had all the talent to be able to do it in-house. A lot of times hiring a consultant is a political move, not necessarily a knowledge move. Sometimes, often it's a knowledge move as well. I'm just saying there are good reasons for both. All right, so I have 2 bonus for you guys. Okay, next slide. There we go. All right, number 11. It's a bonus. I told you there would be 10, but I'm giving you actually 12 because of bonus. We don't need to worry about localization. We'll never localize. That's one of the mistakes I see. Here's the truth. You need to act like you're going to localize. Whether or not you ever expect to localize, you need to act like you are. Because, in my experience, if you're not localizing, what's going to happen is somebody is going to wander in your office and say, oh my God, we just made a $10 million deal with this company in Germany, and the docs have to be delivered in German. Can you believe that? Yeah, we're going to start delivering in 3 months. And now you're looking at your content going, we never architected any of this content for localization. We've always meant to, but we haven't. And it's going to cost top dollar, and it's going to be hell. And in my experience, if you're not localizing now, that's how it's going to happen. If you aren't localizing now, you know how complicated this can be. You know what your budget looks like. And you know somebody's going to wander in your office with that German deal, and now you've got to suddenly localize into German, and you've never done Indo-European language. You guys have always done the Asian languages. Why? Because that's where your market is, right? And localizing into German is completely different. Why is it completely different? Because German takes almost up to 50% more space to localize. And if you're looking at localizing into that, and oh, by the way, they want it all available on smartphones, and you've never thought of that, you've got a problem on your hands. And that's the wrong moment to go, yeah, we should move to topic-based offering. Wrong moment. And then here's number 12, my personal favorite. Buying a tool and then calling the consultant. New tools, as I said earlier before, but I want this as its own standalone. New tools always change the workflow. And buying a new tool, getting a new tool, you've got to get a tool that supports both your content workflow now and as it changes, and the business workflow you need. And by business workflow, I mean everything. There are business people who are interested in the cost of developing content, and they've got some ideas. And everybody is getting finally the content is critical in a company, and this is rising up to become a very visible problem. So don't buy a tool and then call a consultant, please. I speak on behalf of all consultants, because odds are better than good. You've bought a tool that kind of solves some of your problems, but may actually create more problems. And that's just the nature of it. It's just the nature of it. All right, so we now have, I told you I was going to be done in under an hour, and I am. We now have about 10 minutes for questions. Throw your questions up. I want to make sure that you got something of value, and hopefully you got a question answered. So get your question up, type away. Hopefully there are 150 flying fingers. Hopefully there are more than, hopefully there's a lot of questions. Although, by the way, I wanted to say this, if you decide to bring in a consultant, make sure that your consultant is asking questions, working with you, talking. Don't go with a consultant who comes in and tells you as they walk in the door what you need to do. I've had clients who have fired the previous consultant because the previous consultant came in and just literally walked in the door and said, okay, now here's what you need. And didn't want to hear from what was going on, what the business needs were, didn't want to look at previous work that might have been done, didn't want to do that. They just didn't. And so hiring a consultant is kind of like getting into a serious relationship with somebody. I'm not saying you have to marry them. That's buying the tool. Buying the tools is marrying somebody. But the consultant is kind of like the marriage broker, right? And if you're not comfortable with the marriage broker, don't go with them. They're not the right person. And you could, your comfort level could just be, I don't know, I just don't like them that much. Okay, that's sufficient. For example, I am not the right consultant for everybody. I spend a lot of time laughing, and there are business environments in which that actually upsets people. And so I'm not the right person. All right, so I don't see a ton of questions up, which is fantastic. I want to let everybody know there will be a recording of this webinar. It will be made available to all of you. And so you can review this again later if you had to come in late, if you have people at your workplace that you want to see this. You'll be getting that link later today or tomorrow. And then Patty's got a great question up. She says, do you have a checklist or steps to prepare for conversion? And the answer is kind of, but it depends on what kind of content, etc. You could put together a checklist based off these slides. You could start doing that. But in general, you have to do that content analysis of what's there and look at the business needs to start to put together that checklist. I mean, obviously I have, is the content coherent? Is it written well? Is it structured well? Okay, what do we need to do that before we move it into whatever it is we're going to move it into? I mean, there is that. I like to do a content inventory. And by inventory, I not only mean what is it we have, but where is it? You'd be shocked at where people don't have content. It turns out we've got the output, but we don't know where the source files are. And if you're in that situation, don't be shocked. An awful lot of companies are in that situation. What tools do I like for editing content, or editing data? I am learning Oxygen right now. I've been impressed with Easy Data. I have not actually got my hands in it yet, but it kind of has a Word environment. It depends on the audiences. TechCom people have different authoring needs than occasional contributors. So it just kind of depends. Mike wants to know about meta tagging, metadata tagging to enable systematic content reuse. It is one way that you could do it, Mike. Again, it depends on the business drivers and the kind of content. And I know this sounds so vague. I'm sorry. And then Patty wants to know, would she start doing a restructure in our current tool? I prefer to do the restructure in the current tool before moving to the structured authoring tool. If for no other reason than you guys already know the current tool. And it will be less painful to do that restructure in the current tool. And when it gets into the new tool, it's all shiny and new and cool, and at least you have that sense. So you're not trying to fight learning this new tool at the same time you're trying to get the content restructured. That's my preference. It is not necessarily a best practice, Patty. It's my preference. That's what I recommend to my clients. But there are compelling reasons to not do it too, depending on the business environment. I'm just telling you. And I always like to make a distinction between what is, in my experience, best practice across industries, across companies, and what is my personal preference. I always like to make that distinction so that people understand when I'm making that distinction. Believe me, not every word out of my mouth is the best practice. But I like to be clear when I am saying a best practice. So, all right, so if you are taking off, I want to, hold on, I want to show you good resources. My website, I've got a ton of articles on content and around content and things like that. There's a book just came out in the last 2 weeks called Enterprise Content Strategy. It is fantastic. And who asked? Patty, you asked the steps for conversion. These aren't the steps for the conversion. This book goes through all the steps you need to think about before you make that conversion. I think Patty has left. But fantastic. fantastic. So you want to definitely get that. Kurt Ahmet's book, Single Sourcing, Building Modular Documentation, it's quite old. It's hard to find, but if you can find a copy, it's worth it. He's talked about a forward-thinking book. At the time it came out, it was hardly made a blip on the radar. It's turning out to be huge. So, yeah. Oh, sorry, Patty. It was a different Patty. Sarah O'Keefe and Ellen Pringle's Content Strategy 101, excellent book. And then Rahel's and Naz's book, Content Strategy, Connecting the Dots Between Business, Brand, and Benefits, also a good book. By the way, if you're looking at that, trying to write this down, I'd like to point out that Alt Print Screen is a great way to capture this slide if you want to capture it right now. I'm going to move away from it now in 3, 2, 1. Okay, moving away. So we are at the top of the hour. I want to thank you so much for the time you've given me. I hope you learned something useful. If you've got questions now, because you might, or later, there's my email, there's my Twitter. You can contact me on either one. I'm perfectly comfortable that way. And I want to thank again DCL for hosting this for us. I'm really hoping this was helpful for you guys. And let's do it all a big virtual round of applause for DCL. Don't forget, you'll be getting the recording link later today or tomorrow. And feel free to socialize that out, etc. I did it in an hour. Yay! Thank you guys so much.
Hey Sharon.
Adam. Yes.
Hey, I just received a question via email. Do you have time to answer it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to read it right now, and it is, do you have any data that you could share where a company had not planned for content to be authored for tablet and mobile devices, and they suddenly needed to make that transition? If so, what was the cost to the company that could have been avoided had they planned accordingly?
Oh gosh, I've only got anecdotal stuff, but it's going to be expensive, and frankly, you're going to need DCL. You guys actually would be. If I had a client who suddenly needed that, I would call you guys, because this is one of the things you guys do, and you would be able to guide us through, here's what we've got, we're in the process of X, Y, and Z, there's a $10 million deal that needs to be delivered right now that we just found out about, help us do this right now. You guys would be the place I would go. I'm sorry, it sounds like you were begging for, please Sharon, say we're wonderful. It's just the truth. If we needed to slam through it, that's where I would go, because I know you guys can do it, and then that buys us time to go back and figure out a strategy and a plan for later. So that may or may not have helped, but that's what I would do. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome. I'm done, Adam. Close us out.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending. Again, thank you, and you all have a great day.
All right. Go do something wonderful, every one of you. Thanks so much. Bye.